Okay, so there was a part of this lesson last time when we were working where I just could not come up with the direction I wanted to go to describe the conditional truth table. And so what I would like to do is completely change the descriptions I was using for fear that what you'll remember is my fumblings and not the corrected way of saying it. So if I just change the ifs and the thens, I think that might be most helpful at this point. I was trying to decide how I wanted to do that. All right, so we're going to look back at that conditional table that we started to create and killed. I think this is where I was going to put it. All right, so we're going to draw the truth table just like we were talking about before, P and Q. And then this one's the implication P arrow Q. And we're going to go with these as our statements, not because they're all that much different, just because I want them to be somewhat different than what I did before, so don't confuse anything. So we're going to do, I'm a dad. And I'm a man. I know, it's not altogether that much different, but I think it's enough different that it'll distinguish it in our heads for the moment, okay? All right, so I want you to imagine getting a text message or something where you couldn't decipher somebody's voice or their appearance. And so you just get this text message. And this text message, the person says something like this. I'm a dad, therefore I'm a man. And you would be like, well, that makes sense. Usually what we mean by the word dad means that you're a man with child, right? So yeah, that would make sense, and you would say that that was a true statement. So they're a dad, and they're a man, and you say true. It's kind of awkward for me to say a false statement, so the next one I'm going to write down is true and then false. We can write them all in. Let me just do that first. False, true, false, false. These are always the same, no matter what kind of a statement we're working with, so we'll just put those in. So it's kind of weird to say, I'm a dad, and it is false that I'm a man. So I'm just going to use the negation when I say that so that it makes more sense, like linguistically, to say it, okay? So if you get this text message and this person says, I'm a dad, and I am not a man, you're going to say, no, right? That doesn't work. You've somehow messed up the definition, so that's a false statement. Those two are usually okay. We see how those make sense. The other two are the ones that are a little bit weird at the bottom. So the third one actually says, I am not a dad. The problem with that statement is, I am not a dad could still mean that the person is a man or a woman, right? Just because they're not a dad doesn't change whether or not they have a male or a female, person. That doesn't matter. And so either of those statements could be true with what follows. I am not a dad. That's what the falses would mean here. I am not a dad, and I'm a man. Okay, so we're going to take their word for it, that they're not lying to us, right? So we would say, okay, that can be a true statement. And the other one, I am not a dad, and I am not a man. Okay, again, also equally possible. We could certainly make that be a true statement. So the default position that happens when we start out with a false statement on the conditional is that we end up with a true conclusion. And the reason is because we don't have enough information on the if to verify for sure that the conclusion would be false. Are you with me? So, kind of like the innocent until proven guilty kind of dialogue that we have in court, right? Like, I don't have any reason to think that it has to be false. So we're going to assume that the person is being true. All right. The other thing that we did last time is we watched a VeggieTale video, and the VeggieTale video was specifically related to the ideas that are coming next. And so those are the ideas of, okay, I'll come back to this one because I wanted to finish this anyway. The conditional's right here. So we'll come back to the example I just skipped in a second. I promise we'll do 7. So a statement is an if-then statement looks like, I'm just going to write them in symbols first, like this, P arrow Q. So an if-then statement says something like in our example, it was, if it is a monkey, then it has a tail. Something like that, right? If it is a monkey, then it has a tail. And we're all like, okay, that's fine. So converses, what they do, converses and inverses both change things around, and so does the contrapositive. But each of them changes things a little bit differently. So a converse actually changes the order. And this is exactly what Larry was doing when he was changing his order around in his language. If it has a tail, then it is a monkey. That's what he just did, right? If it is a monkey, then it has a tail, and so he changed it around. He says, if it has a tail, then it is a monkey. Okay, so when we just change the order of the if and the then around, that creates the converse. The inverse is created when we negate things. So instead of changing the order, we change it to be negation. And Larry did this too. So my example I did before, I'll keep referencing it from the video. So if it is a monkey, then it has a tail. Okay, so that was my statement that I'm kind of referencing back to. For an inverse, the order doesn't change. So the monkey part stays at the beginning, the tail part stays at the end. But we negate each piece. So we say, if it is not a monkey, and we say, then it does not have a tail. Okay, so you're just negating the pieces, but you don't change the direction. And the last one, the contrapositive, does both of those things at the same time. So it negates them and it changes the order. So like that. So we negate the ending part. The ending part was about tail, so we would say if it does not have a tail, and we negate the beginning part, then it is not a monkey. So we're negating pieces of this as we go, but we're negating them in such a way that, that they have these different structures. And the reality is that some of these things are actually equivalent to one another, and that's the note that you see here. You will explore in your group work problems which of these statements are logically equivalent, because they're not all equivalent, as you saw with the cow showing up in Larry's thing, right? He kept changing statements around, and sometimes in ways that are not appropriate to change, and ended up drawing conclusions that didn't make any sense. Yeah? So there are some of these statements that are equivalent to one another, but there's also ones of them that are not equivalent to one another. So the first thing that we are going to do then is to actually finish the monkey and the tail, and we're going to write them out. So we had mentioned before the monkey and the tail. So I already wrote the original one on the previous slide, and you have it written here again. If I'm a monkey, then I have a tail. You can say if it is a monkey if you prefer. But so we're going to write out the three of them that I've verbalized a moment ago. We're going to do the converse first. So what does the converse do? It just switches the order around. So it moves the tail part to the beginning, and it moves the monkey part to the end. So it would say, if I have a tail, then what? Yeah, then it's a monkey, or then I am a monkey. I've used the words I, so I'll stick with I on my screen, but feel free to adjust that. Okay, so what does the inverse do? Yeah, it negates them. So make sure you're going back to the original statement, not to the converse statement, okay? So back to the original statement, and we don't change the order. What we do, though, is we negate them. So instead of it saying, if I'm a monkey, it will say, yeah, if it's not a monkey, or if I am not a monkey. Then what? Yeah. I do not have a tail. Okay. And then a contrapositive does both. It swaps the order again from the original statement, and it negates. So I start at the ending of it, the part about the tail, and we move it to the beginning, and we negate it. So we say, if I do not have a tail, then I, and we negate the first part, am not a monkey. Okay, is that all right? Okay, so I did skip one. It was akin to what we were doing last time, but I wanted to kind of finish up with where we had left off. I'm kind of moving all around in this section. I apologize for that. But I wanted to finish up from where we had left off on the video that we had seen. So, all right, we'll go back and get the one last example, and I'll mention this one from before. We had talked about taking symbols and rewriting them in words, and we're going to do words to symbols. So this one was taking the words and putting them in symbols. This one over here is going to take symbols and write them in words. So the context themselves of the letters or the statements is given in the sentence at the beginning of example 7. P is the statement, God loves me, and Q is the statement, I am a sinner. Okay? And so we're going to write sentences that correspond to the following symbols. So we have a P, we have an upside down V, and then we have a Q. So we start out by simply writing P, and P is the statement, God loves me. God loves me. Okay, what does that next symbol mean? And then my last statement, or second statement, is I am a sinner. Now, it doesn't ask us the truth or the falseness of any of these statements, right? That's not what we're doing. The statement's true. It is a true statement. God does love us, and we are all sinners. Like, that's true. But as we write this next one, I just want you to feel like, I'm not asking you, does it look like it's weird? It feels weird when we write it, but our goal right now is just to simply rewriting part of it. So on the next one, it has tilde P. So if P is the statement, God loves me, what would tilde P? If God does not love me. Now that feels like a funny premise because it's not a true statement, right? So if you think about my true-false tables that I was creating before, right? Like if I'm starting out with something like over here, that one, where I'm starting out false, this is where we are. We're starting with something that's a false statement. So if it feels a little bit weird, that's actually the why. When you start out with a statement that's false, it feels very awkward to write it, okay? So that's natural that it would feel false in this case. Get the right slide. So if comes before it because of the arrow, right? The arrow tells me the if comes at the beginning. If you want to write the word then, you certainly can. If you just want to move on without the word then, it's okay as well because it's inferred. Then what? What is Q?
I'm a sinner.
Yeah, then I am a sinner. Okay, so that is the natural, not natural, but that is the correct writing of this statement as is. But again, it feels weird and it doesn't make sense because the premise itself is false. Are you with me? So it's okay to write a statement that doesn't make sense. I know it sounds like a strange thing to say, but just don't feel like you did something wrong necessarily. If the premise is false, that's probably why that feels that way.